So I was a little reluctant to present tonight because I was given two sort of barriers. They said, okay, you can only talk for 5 minutes, and you can't talk about TouchBistro. And I said, well, I might as well not even show up. That's like, anybody who's heard me speak, the 5 minutes part is just going to be impossible to stand up to. But what I did want to do, and then so I called the organizers too, and I said, okay, well, if I can't talk about TouchBistro, tell me a bit about the crowd, tell me a bit about the people that are there. What kind of things do you guys present at TechTO? I'm embarrassed to say it's my first time here. And I said, well, it's going to be a lot of startups who have, similar dreams and ideas and hopes, and they'd love to hear from you as to how, you grew TouchBistro. And I said, well, that I can talk about, because that's something I'm passionate about, and I'm very passionate about the Toronto tech community. And I said, well, I can tell you about that. Lately, I've also had the privilege of, I've been asked to mentor at Techstars as well, and it's great to see all these young startups, and I'm reminded of what it was like when we started, and seeing all the young, fresh faces brings back the old days. So I thought I would tell you why I think Toronto is a great city, because I constantly hear people say, oh, well, it's so much easier if I was in the valley, or it'd be so much easier if I had this, or a previous track record, or a previous success, it's so easy for you, and it's like, well, it's actually not. It's very difficult, regardless where you are, but it's no difficult here than anywhere else. And so it's true, it all started right here, back in 2010. And it was one of my favorite pictures when we were, this is actually 2 years after we started, and it was our first real independent office. Before that, we were sharing office space with other people and, trying to get people to use our product, and it was like it was said earlier, it was very difficult in the beginning to get people to use our product. Probably took us 6 months to get 35 customers, right? It was just very, very hard to convince people to use our product in the beginning. And, but we persevered. We kept going. This was our first company car, right? Our electric scooter. This is not a foodie driver. This is actually what this is, my wife. We used to run around in this little guy because we didn't need insurance or we didn't need a license for that. So running around, bombing around to see customers was a piece of cake, and any one of us could just take the car. So the car, right? So then, but we persevered and we kept going, and so this was about 2 years later, our first one of our first big holiday parties, and then a year later we had doubled in size, and we kept going, and then this is us today. 237 employees right here in downtown Toronto. And we have 5 offices all over the world. And as I was said earlier, we have customers all over the world. Has anyone here heard of TouchBistro? That's great. I'm glad I love when I do that at tech sessions and I see so many hands, but I was surprised. I was in a banking conference last year, and I asked the same question thinking that I could have 1 or 2 hands, and it was the same thing. So it was amazing to see the reach that we've had, not just in the tech community, but beyond. So TouchBistro Today. Today, when you add up all of our restaurants and all the food volume processing and all the transactions that they do, we process over $6 billion a year in payments, which is like a staggering number. We have over 20,000 iPads or tablets deployed across the world, and we've helped bring to life over 12,000 different restaurants with our technology, and we've won numerous awards, and we have a patent on some of the stuff that we've done, and we just most recently won Deloitte Fast 50. So that's where we are today, but I did want to talk about, again, how we got here. How was that, how long, and by the way, it took 7 years. Everyone I talk to is like, oh, you guys are an overnight success. Yeah, we're a 7-year-old overnight success, right? So, and we have become the #1 grossing point-of-sale app in over 37 countries around the world. And that map literally shows our customers all over the world. And my point here is that Canadian companies can compete worldwide. You shouldn't be nervous or worried that we can't compete. We can do just as good a job as anyone else. So funding, I get asked this quite a bit. People say to me, well, how'd you raise money? You can't raise any money here in Canada. There's no VCs. I got to go to the Valley. I got to pitch my idea there. I get asked this all the time. Should I go to the Valley? Sure, if you want, but you don't have to go to the Valley. There's tons of VCs here. But it's not, you just have to have conviction and a viable business idea. Because, and even when you have that, it's still difficult. So I'll give you a perfect example. So as Alex said earlier, my previous company was a e-commerce company. So back in 1997, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to let people sell, merchandise online, but make it themselves? Because back then it cost like almost $1 million if you wanted a whole e-commerce website that took credit cards and everything else. So, how many people here have heard of Shopify? Another great Canadian success, right? And, tremendous worldwide successful company. So my previous company, Inex, was exactly what Shopify was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you could create a template, pick a template, and sell your items online. And when I started that company, I used to go to the VCs and say, I got this idea, I want to let people, sell their own services and products online, make it, from a template, list of templates. And the reaction I got from the bankers, the VC community, things like that was, that is the stupidest idea I ever heard in my life. Who is ever going to buy something online, right? I would never put my credit card online. That is just madness, right? You're an idiot, right? So 3 years later, I sold the company for $45 million. Thank you. I just turned 30 years old, and I was feeling pretty happy with myself. And I had, by that time, also raised some money for that company. So fast forward a couple years later, when inspiration struck again, and I started TouchBistro, I went back to those same investors that I had made money in the past. And I said, hey guys, I got a great idea. I'm gonna let you take an iPad to the table and take orders and have the orders go automatically to the kitchen and create efficiency in the process. And I was met with a remarkably similar reaction, which was, that is the stupidest idea I've ever heard in my life. Why is anyone gonna take an iPad to the table? Are you insane? You're an idiot, right? And I'm used to being called an idiot, mostly from my wife. So that did not deter me, right? I had to stay at it and prove to people that ultimately this was a good idea. And so again, fast forward 7 years, and we've done all this. But when I went back to those same VCs, and I put this chart on purpose, is this shows you our timeline. Every time we raised money, we actually were able to get to the next plateau, and these are the monthly customers that we have. So today we onboard something like 300 to 400 new restaurants every single month. We do more restaurants in 1 month than we did in the whole year of business, which is amazing. But I thought they're gonna welcome me back like the prodigal son, right? And that did not happen. But all of these companies are Canadian companies. Relay Ventures led our first round, Kensington Capital led our second round, BDC, right? These are all Canadian companies. And our last round was led by a company, international conglomerate, who actually said, if you guys were not in Canada, you would be less appealing to us because our investment dollar goes further, okay? So, very quickly, believe it or not, there are 2,100 to 4,100 new startups in Toronto right now. This is an article that I found on CNBC. More than $2 billion was invested in Canada in 2016. So again, why Toronto versus, I get this asked all the time, why, I need to go to the Valley, go to New York City. Well, first of all, again, your dollar does go further as a founder, or as an investor, or as a VC. Your dollar goes far farther here. And I don't know if you guys know this, there's actually a huge exodus of people leaving the Valley because the cost of living is so high and everything else. You also have a tremendous talent pool. There's 150,000 full-time students enrolled in the universities in the Toronto area. So access to talent is incredible. And you may have heard of this, which is something called SHRED credits, scientific research credits, which is something the government funds and helps you, and they don't have that in the States. That is something that does not exist in the States. And the other thing, something that is very dear to us, is ethnic diversity. You can see it in the culture of Toronto. Toronto's a multicultural city. And it would be extremely boring if we all felt the same way, thought the same way, dressed the same way. And we have, if you come to our offices, you'll see that we have representatives from all walks of life. The other thing that people forget about Toronto is, we have incredible internet speeds. I know everyone likes to complain about these things, but when I did this 20 years ago, I remember someone quoted, we wanted a 1 megabit full up and down connection, and they were quoting us $12,000, right, for a 1 meg connection. And if you wanted a T1 line, it was called back then, like a gigabit, they wanted $45,000 a month. Today I have 1 gig to my house, and I pay like $79 a month, right? It's like unbelievable, right? Public transit. We all like to knock the TTC, but try living in a city that has no subway system, right? And easily half of our employees come to work using subway or the TTC. And if I ever were to try to move us away from the downtown core, I'd probably lose half of our staff. And then this ties into the last piece about the ethnic diversity of the city, is we have an incredible thriving food scene. Right? I love the fact that we can walk around and one day I feel like Chinese food, one day I feel like sushi, one day I feel like a chicken shawarma. Like I can do whatever I want. It's all 5 minutes away from walking to our offices. And so Toronto's if you're a foodie, which I've become a foodie now because of my job, it's a great, great city to let your taste buds explore. And so lastly, I just want to talk about that Toronto has an incredible outlook. We've got, you guys have seen the park that they want to create downtown, which I think would be a tremendous addition to our city. Like the new Toronto sign that was a big controversy. You know how many tourists that we get a year from that? If they create this park, I forget what they call it, Rail Park or things like that, right? When they built, I spent a lot of my time in New York. We have an office in New York, but when they built Central Park, there was huge controversy around that. Half the people didn't want it. And now it's the #1 draw to that city. And I think there's nothing but an upside for Toronto, and the future is extremely bright. And I had my choice to start and pick any city in the world to start TouchBistro, and I returned to Toronto, and I started it here. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Hello, Alex. I'm just curious about your background. What did you do before 1997?
Before 1997. So, actually, here's one thing I forgot to mention that most people will be surprised about. I was not born in Canada. And so I came to Canada when I was 6 years old. I was born in Uruguay in South America, and I didn't learn English until I was 8 years old. And there's another preconception again. I'm a first-generation immigrant. I'm a very proud Canadian. I became naturalized when I was 10 years old. And again, I lived in 4 other countries, and having lived in 4 other countries, and I now realize when you go abroad that how much advantages we have here in a country like Canada. But you mean my ethnic background, my educational background, or? Yeah, so I was a programmer. My first love was programming, right? And so my hobby became my job, and I still work. I love being part of the product team and strategizing with people, and that's my favorite thing to do. That takes me away from all the madness of raising money and all the hard parts of the job, right?
Does it become easier the second time around starting a company?
No. Not at all. It becomes harder, I think harder every time because the stakes are higher. There's a lot more competition. The good part, I'm grateful there are so many startups, but you have to compete with them now, right? So salaries have gone up, everything's gone up. But like I was saying before, I thought that, hey, I'm just going to show up, go to my old VC friends, they're going to just cut me a blank check, and here you go, man, that's a great idea, right? No. You are judged every time. Like, I'll get in the door, right? I will get in the door, but once you're in the door, you better have something good to say. And you have to have, measurable business plan, idea. A friend of mine who's a VC says, we always look for 3 things. One, we look for, who the founder is, because, if Jack Dorsey walks in somewhere, he's going to get an audience, right? What is the idea, and how big is the market? And then lastly is, what is the deal? Because if I hear this all the time, I mentor startups, like, we've got a great idea, and we have no sales, but we think it's worth $100 million, right? And, okay, how many products have you shipped? None, but check out our PowerPoint, right? And it's not so simple, right? It's just as hard every time.
Last question of the night.
I have a question here. Hey, hi.
Hey.
So you sold your e-commerce company around 6 years ago, just when e-commerce industry had seen a huge boom. And
20
what
years.
was the reason?
20 years ago.
You sold it 20 years ago?
Yeah.
And what was the reason for it?
Why was the reason I sold it 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Because someone offered me $45 million. And when you're 29 years old, that's a really big deal, right? So that was a really easy decision. But I do get asked all the time. They're like, don't you wish you waited? Because Shopify is such a big success, don't you wish you waited? No. And if someone offers you this, I say to startups that I mentor all the time, if someone offers you tomorrow $45 million for your company, or I'll give you $200 million in 15 years, you take the first offer, right? Because like you don't know what's going to happen, right? And so in fact, you know, I lived through two .com like booms and busts. 8 weeks after I sold my last stock, the market collapsed. You know, like the whole boom disappeared. Had
What
it
do you
waited
think?
longer, it would have like never happened, right?
I'm sorry. What do you think is the next area of interest that you might be focusing into?
What that I'm going to be doing like now or after this?
Next after this.
Oh, I like to be single-minded and single-focused. And I would tell every other entrepreneur to do the same thing. Don't count your chickens until they're hatched. Focus on making your current company successful. There's a saying that says, successful companies are not sold, they're bought, right? So you focus on doing everything you can. Every single waking moment of my day is focused on this company. If I should one day exit, then I'll worry about the next cool thing.
Thank you very much, sir.